Our story today came from the Gospel of John, and it was the crucifixion as written in the Gospel of John. One side detail, or lack of detail, worth noting is how few details there are in the Gospel. There is not a focus on the gruesomeness of crucifixion, which is something that we should pay attention to. That focus is not there. It is a terrible thing, but other things are happening in this story. At the very end of the crucifixion, before the Lord gives up the Spirit, at his very, very end, the last act as Jesus, he has his mother before him. This is his mom. Jesus knows he is God. Mary is looking at the child she nursed. What was that like for her? Yes, we will talk about what an internal sense of this might be and how it can apply to us. But it is worth remembering that this was a real woman who raised this real person and loved him as her own son, even knowing he was not. Which again, we'll get to again in a moment. The Lord turns to Mary and he says, "Woman," not mother, "woman, behold your son." Now this can be taken in many ways. In one way, you could say, "Look, woman, here I am." But that's not really what's happening here, because there's another person standing right there. If you'll remember, in the story, the disciples scattered when the Lord was arrested. And even Peter, sort of the lead of the disciples, denies that he even knows Jesus 3 times. They follow him, they watch, but they're standing afar. Yet at this moment, at his last breath, when he gives up the Spirit, there is one disciple. And the Gospel of John describes him as the disciple whom Jesus loved. All throughout the Gospel of John, that is a way of telling us that it is John. There is John, the disciple, standing within speaking distance of the Lord being crucified with Mary. And the Lord is telling Mary, John is as if your son. And we know this because he turns to John and says, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, that disciple took her to his own home. It's a very simple, natural detail. The Lord was finishing his natural obligations. As the firstborn son, it's his obligation to make sure that when he dies, his mother, who's still alive, probably older now, probably around 50, is taken care of, especially in this ancient world. And so, he charges his disciple, John, to take care of her. And he doesn't just watch after her, she comes to live in his house for the end of her days. We know elsewhere that John lives a very long life. And we know that he is a disciple who travels, who preaches, who teaches, and yet he's always taking care of Mary at home. That's his job. And after she dies, he continues to be a disciple. But that was his first charge by the Lord, to take care of Mary. Now, Jesus, in this story, is at the end of the crucifixion. He is, at that moment, glorifying. It says, when Jesus, at that hour, after this, Jesus knowing that all things were now accomplished. In other words, he knew at that moment he had done everything he needed to do. It is a special moment in the life of the Lord. It is, in many ways, the point of Jesus. We all may know and remember, and if you don't, now you know, that women in the Word often represent the church, especially mothers and brides. And Mary here can be seen to represent the church. John, as one of the Lord's disciples, does represent doctrine, as all the disciples do, but he has a special role, especially when identified individually and described as the one whom Jesus loved. He is love of doctrine. He's not the truths. He's not the 10 Commandments that you just heard in this story. He is the affection for those 10 Commandments. And it's his job to take care of the church. It's the affection of truth that cares for the church. And who is the church? Well, the church is by degree. There is continuous and discrete degrees. One of the most fascinating passages is that no amount of doctrine can be understood apart from an understanding of degrees. So if we're going to understand who the church is, it's important to understand degrees. There are continuous degrees, which are all of a similar kind, and then discrete degrees, which are higher and lower, and still related, but of a different kind. So, at one level, the church is this corporate body. In fact, the word corporate even has the word for body buried in it. It's this organization. There are natural churches. There's physical churches. You're sitting in a church. It was funded by people who sit on a corporation, and there's a board of trustees. There's this natural thing called a church. That's at one level. And it's by continuous level. The church is more or less a church to the degree that it is following and serving the Lord. In many other places in the general church, the church building itself is sometimes rented out to other people. In those cases, it's less of a church. Sometimes this building is less of a church and more of a museum as people get tours, but even then we try to keep it kind of like a church. But you can see how there are continuous degrees of churchiness even for a building. The same is true with our corporate body. Our church pays taxes, we have board meetings, sometimes we discuss really boring things like spreadsheets. Oh, so many spreadsheets. Death by PowerPoint. That's a church, but not much of one. Other times, those same meetings are opened with a prayer. That's more of a church. To a higher degree, the church is the Lord's kingdom on earth. But that kingdom is not external. The kingdom of God is within. That church is the church in your heart. And to the degree that we love the Lord and love the neighbor and truth, to that degree we are the church, each of us individually. You are the church. Just as a corporate body, the corporation doesn't exist without you, and this building serves no purpose without you. You are the church, by degree, more or less. The church is also the Lord's kingdom on earth. Just as he has a kingdom of heaven, he has a kingdom on earth. And he rules it, and it has rules. and it has a purpose and an end. In heaven, the members of his kingdom we call angels. And on earth, well, they're you. And what is the end of creation? That you become an angel. That you transition from the Lord's kingdom on earth, temporary, temporal, finite, into being an angel, indefinite, with no end, in his kingdom of heaven. So let's look a little more at angels. We'll look especially at angel mothers. If the church is represented by motherhood in the Word, it is interesting to think how angel mothers can give us a special sense of what his kingdom in heaven is like. In the heavenly doctrine, we are taught that having children and procreation and the care and raising of those children is the highest end, because it looks towards the Lord's end, a kingdom from the heaven, from the human race. And so we can look at angel moms. We are taught that little children who die are immediately brought up into heaven and given into the care of angel moms. These are women and their husbands who, in life, loved children. And those angel moms love these babies given to them as if they were their own. And the children instinctively love their angel mothers. There is nobody in heaven, no angel, that wasn't at one point on earth. Which means all of the children in heaven are fostered. The only moms in heaven are foster moms. And those moms love their children as if they were their own, but knowing all along that those children are the Lord's. This is something that we earthly parents can feel in our more honest and quiet moments, that the children in our care, even if from our own bodies, are only foster children. They too are the Lord's. And they're given to us, and we love them as if instinctively. And yet they are the Lord's. We are not so different from those angel moms in that sense. The real difference is that they know it, and we forget. That difference is going to come up more and more as we examine how we can look towards angels as role models. In our reading from Arcana Celestia 5992, we can see the mechanics of how angels work. One of the fun things about the heavenly doctrine is that it doesn't just tell us what's right and wrong or how to read the word. It gets into the specifics, the mechanics of how the mind works, how angels work, how evil spirits work, how the whole system works. And you can get into the details. And the details are illuminating. We've all heard of guardian angels. And we have guardian angels. You have guardian angels. Angels that guard you. And what are they guarding? They're guarding your head, your spirit, your heart, your will. They are assigned by the Lord to protect you and to guide you and to lead you. And they have rules that they follow. And they are doing the Lord's work. So as we hear about how angels lead, guide, and protect us, Think about how you, as a member of the church, can do something similar, but you have to do it differently because you're not an angel yet. So, angels act secretly. We're mostly not aware of them. And they act on our internals gently. They instill goods and truths. One key way of thinking of this is from the same passage. Angels moderate affections since they constitute a person's life and freedom. They notice the direction in which a person's delight turns and modify and bends the delight toward what is good and away from what is evil. In particular, angels call forth good and truth residing within a person. It's already there. And set them opposite the evils and falsities of evil. And this they do with delight. Indeed, the angels are motivated to do this by a love they receive from the Lord, for nothing gives them more delight and happiness than to remove evils from a person and lead them to heaven. This is their joy. So what do? They watch us. They watch to see where our delights are pulling us. Are they pulling us towards something evil or towards something good? You can imagine this in a moment of temptation. The classic example is the cookie jar, and we'll use that not because I think any of you are going to be stealing from a cookie jar, although maybe, but because your battle is yours. I'm not an angel. I can't see into your heart. Neither can really angels. So, someone's tempted to steal that cookie. They have a natural delight for the sugar and the delight of getting away with something, of doing something bad. Evil, we are taught, has delight. It's insane, but evil's delightful. If evil wasn't delightful, nobody would do it. It'd be easy. It's the problem with evil. People like doing it. It has delight. It's not lasting. It's not eternal. It's not fulfilling. It's insane. And from the perspective of the angels, it's disgusting. But it's there. Angels, in that moment, stir up the goods and truths that are already with a person. When we read the Ten Commandments, perhaps that was something that you recalled. It rang bells. Like if your head is a bell tower, and I say, "You shall not steal," bong, that resonates. You know that. It's already in you. But it's in you because somebody taught it to you. You read it perhaps in the Word. It was given to you by earthly angels, by your teachers, by your parents, by the prophets, by the writers of the Word. They are the messengers of the Lord. And it is the Lord's word speaking to you through those angels. So when we feel tempted and we have pangs of conscience, and perhaps even the words of the Lord himself in our heads, it's because the Lord's angels are stirring up our affections for what is good and true, to put them in opposition to our delight and desire for evil. That's mechanically how that temptation and conscience works. That's where the guardian angels are. They're guarding you in those moments, and often we're unaware of it. Often we don't maybe even think the words, "You shall not." Maybe we do, and that is powerful when we do. But sometimes we just feel yicky about it. That's good. That's the angels stirring up our affections. What's already there. They're not adding anything new. They're bringing up the good and truth that we have an affection for, that we have, a part of us, a love for. And they do this quietly, leaving us in freedom. We are naturally inclined to evils of every kind, and the Lord is constantly reminding us of what is good and true and building in us a new heart that loves those things. So that's what angels do. And we do something similar. Angels have as their end a heaven from a human race, but also you, individually, each of you. Angels are assigned to people, but they're also assigned to individuals. And they love those individuals. And they want that person to go to heaven. And that's what brings them joy. That's their goal. We can have the same goal, but we have to do it very differently. Angels work from the inside out. They notice the delight, they stir up the affections, which bring up thoughts and feelings to pull us away from the delights and towards what is good. We can do the opposite. We can teach. If you tell somebody the truth, you've done the work of an angel from the outside. You've given something that their thought can think about. If you share a good delight, if you bring somebody a birthday cake on their birthday, or give somebody a hug, or smile, or a joke, if you share a good delight in order, you are leading them towards what is good. It's very external, but it's the same goal. We can't stir up people's affections from the inside, but we can affect people. We can have an effect on their affection. We can stir up thoughts in them. When we quote the word to one another, we are recalling what they can already know. One of the most useful things that someone can have by being in a church, which is, after all, just a community of people who share a love for the Lord's truth, is that then they are surrounded by people who share the same affection, but also the same doctrine. A simple example. We in the church know that little children who die are raised by angel mothers. And so, when someone in the church loses an infant, other people can come. And they're not telling them something new. They're not surprising them. They're there to comfort. They can bring them a casserole, a hug, a prayer. But also, like an angel, remind them of that truth. That children who die are raised by angel mothers. That is our ability to love the neighbor as an angel. We are stirring up something true in them that brings them comfort and peace. That's from the Lord. In that moment, we're acting like an angel. And because we're in a community of people who share this belief, they already have it in them. They just need it stirred up. Maybe they're in despair about the loss of this child. And yes, nothing can kill that pain entirely. But it can be comforted. They can help. That's why it's so wonderful to be part of this church. You are so very lucky to be sitting here, to have all these truths laid before you, to be surrounded by a community of people that you could look at now who share these truths too, about mothers, about marriage, about forgiveness, about repentance. You could go down the list. You can even spend a moment after church just thinking about what are some of your favorite truths, the most comforting and loving and helpful things you know and believe, and how you are in a community of people who share those beliefs. And there are all these people in this world who lose children who don't know that, who are not in this community. We could invite them to join. It is an act of love to share the truth. Not after, but before. This is one of the most powerful things the Lord taught his disciples. He said, "What I tell you now, you will not understand. But later, you will recall. And then you will know me." And it was true. Think back again to John receiving Mary as his daughter, or as his mother, him as her son. He will love her. The Lord told John and all the disciples, "Love one another. By this will all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one to another." And so we can see John, an angel in training, loving this woman, taking care of her. Not just taking care of her by keeping her in the house, but perhaps on those sad days, reminding her of who Jesus was. Reminding her of the glory of the Lord's kingdom. And we can do the same. We can be angels to one another. We can be servants of his kingdom on earth. And in time, and in practice, and in habit, even forevermore. Amen.